Welcome back to We Do the Heavy Lifting. I'm your host, Dr. Jenna Yentis, and today we're going to talk about relationships, specifically how being part of an athletic team may shape relationships and how that translates to real life. And our guest today is Dr. Megan Willams from Texas A&M University. Now you teach in health behavior and you are a certified health education specialist. And a lot of your work centers around just relationship health, sexual health, a lot of different things that a lot of people don't usually associate with athletics.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit, you're a student athlete yourself, or were.
Yeah.
Maybe you still are. If you're, I mean, you might be a lifelong student.
That's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about what led you to these interesting topics?
Sure. Well, I think I've been interested from a young age in being athletic. I played soccer when I was little. I was the only goalie on a bunch of boys team. So I kind of always had this grit and this spirit. I started horseback riding, and then my friend introduced me into volleyball when I was little. And I became a manager and then kind of sparked into this big world of volleyball, and I just kind of fell in love with it. I'm really small, so I had a lot of obstacles to overcome, but I love the team aspect of it. I didn't love the idea of going out to compete by myself, although track and other swimming sports do have a team component. I really loved getting to work with other people to be successful in a goal, and I think that's maybe why I've kind of fell in love with that, understanding healthy relationships now and using that in my everyday life. So I think when you play a team sport, you choose sports because of your characteristics, and some people thrive in individual sports and other people thrive in group sports, and that was me. I loved being on a team. I loved the camaraderie. I loved traveling to events. I loved feeling success because of other people and contributing, not being so kind of individual and to myself.
Totally understand that. So the team aspect is really what drew you into that. Can you talk a little bit about how being in athletics, what is a relationship or your idea of that team mentality? How is that different from somebody that's maybe not an athlete? Is there a difference there?
You know, I was just talking to a couple coaches and some former athletes. A lot of my current friends are former athletes, regardless of sport, and even at different universities. And I think what comes to mind is the accountability piece. So being on a team requires you to be selfless, right? You have to think about other people, because if you don't, the team fails. And so as I've kind of moved throughout my career, I think I've taken that with me, that idea that it's not just about me. It's about, if I don't show up on time, then my class doesn't start. Even though I'm the only professor, right? That impacts my students. If I don't complete my research on time, the project won't move forward. And so I think the mentality of being an athlete helps you understand how to be selfless and how to be accountable. A lot of those aspects I don't think I would have gotten had I not been a very high level athlete. And even transitioning from club, which was very intense, to a college environment where it is make or break, right? If our team is not successful on the court and off the court, staff could change, athletes could change, people might leave. And so there is that pressure. And so I've been under so many circumstances where if we don't do well, things will happen. There are consequences. And so I've noticed it in my preparation for my current job and for coaching that I have now, of how to function under pressure, but how to cope with it. And those healthy coping strategies that help us and help me respond to challenges, right? We need to get our GPA to a certain point, or we are looking for our team to win this many matches. And how do you handle stress in a way that's healthy, but also promotes competition, and what to do when we fail, and resiliency? So if I do something in a class and it doesn't go well, I'm not going to stop, right? I'm going to change what I do. And I think because I was pushed so far in both high school and college, but specifically college, I have those coping strategies, and I'm not afraid to shy away from a challenge. Or when something doesn't go well, I don't run away from it. It's more so, well, that didn't go very well, I didn't look best in this instance, or I tried something in my classroom and it didn't go well. What can I do to change it? What can I do to move forward? So I think being an athlete puts you under a lot of pressured situations that help you develop at some point those coping strategies that move into career.
So a lot of what you talked about can go one way or the other, right? You could develop a coping strategy for being competitive or resiliency. It could also go the other direction.
1000%.
So how do you, not ensure, but how do you guide an athlete towards maybe the positive side? Because there is human. Sometimes we tend to be negative. That's part of our
Yeah, I think being an athlete is so much more than the game. And so I coach an 11s team right now through Skyline, which I absolutely love. And, sometimes I come back to the fact that it's so much more than the game, right? We lost, but we lost because we weren't accountable for ourselves. We lost because we weren't where we were supposed to be, right? And so in times people are going to count on you to be in certain places. And so I think it's really having coaches and mentors that understand that concept and help them come to the idea that it's not just about winning and losing. It's about the game of life through the sport of volleyball. It's about the game of life throughout whatever sport it is. And so I think if we're missing that really positive influence of a mentor or a coach that has that kind of more comprehensive aspect of the game, that's when we start to see those struggles. And there were some coaches, I'll be completely honest, that didn't teach that, right? It was about wins and losses. I can remember a coach that told me to take emotion out of the game, and I thought he was silly because we are human beings worthy of emotions. And he told us we were, girls that were too emotional, we weren't ever going to win. And I'm like, well, maybe we should learn some strategies for how to channel that emotion into competitiveness. What can we do when we are so enraged, like we've made error after error? And so that wasn't a great example. And so I think having mentors that understand that it goes beyond the game and having mentors that are positive role models, right? And that you can go to when things are tough. I think that also includes the parent piece. So we are learning how to play a role at 11. My 11s are learning that sometimes you don't get to play. And so what does that mean for me, right? That means that I'm going to be a positive role model for my teammates on the sidelines. Whenever I do get my opportunity, I'm going to go in and be great. But I think helping them understand that from a young age is maybe a little bit of what I missed. And learning that was hard.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And having people to be able to process that through. So parents that are supportive of the process is crucial. If we have parents that are like, my kid is the best thing since sliced bread, it's going to be kind of difficult as a coach if we're not on the same page. So I send out a lot of emails about this is the process we're working on. This is the rotation that we're working on. So I think it's a mixture of self kind of understanding that piece of reflection and learning, I made an error. This is what's going to happen, but here's how I can cope from that and do better. The parent piece of how can I be supportive and how can I understand the game, and mentors that are thinking about more than just, are we going to win or are we going to lose?
It takes a village, right?
Yeah.
It does. It takes a lot of people. So what happens for an athlete then that has been on a team sport, gets injured, they're not allowed to to play.
Sure.
Life changes for them.
Absolutely.
And so I think a lot of what you work on is instances of how do you make those transitions?
Yeah.
What is some of the advice, or how do you work through that transition with an athlete?
Sure. I think about the first time I got seriously injured, a little personal moment here. I was at Houston. I played volleyball for East Carolina, and we were at Houston actually, and I rolled my ankle for the first time in my whole life at like 18 or 19. I'm bawling, crying. I'm on the sideline. My dad remembers not being able to see me online, and he was like, "Where are you?" And I had a friend carry me to the other sideline. And for me, it was kind of a big like, well, my life's going to change now, right?
Yeah.
Like my option to play is low. And I think, again, that piece of what role do you play on a team, and what is this really trying to teach me? So injuries happen all the time, and teams who have more positive cultures, there's less injuries. Generally, teams who have more negative cultures, there's more injuries, right? And so thinking about how can we turn this injury into something positive? And I think a lot of what I'm talking about, I hear myself, is that mentality, having a strong mental mindset from a really young age, and that there's going to be moments of injury, there's going to be moments of sickness, there's going to be moments of not playing, and how do you overcome that? So when I think about injuries, it's all about what's my mental capacity and my emotional intelligence and my resiliency skills, and what have I learned up to this point to get me through this? Big advice would be to have a support system. Therapy, I never had access to a psychologist, and I wish I did. I didn't know that was something that happened. So a sports psychologist would be the first one. I think you need a positive culture from a team aspect though, right? So what is your coach going to say now? And hopefully it's not your cut because you're injured. Hopefully this is a moment of, something that you couldn't control. Here's how you're going to come back from it. Yeah. And here's how you can support your teammates when you're not on the court. Can you grow your volleyball IQ? Big part of being an athlete is what's happening, right? You don't even have to be able to do the skill to understand what's going on. So can you watch film? Can you break down film? Can you help your teammates who are struggling with a certain skill? Can you help coach, sort of, right? Be that kind of mentor piece. So I think it's reframing it into, instead of this is happening to me, how can I change this, right? This happened to me because, and what can I do because of it? But it takes a lot of deep breath. It's going to be okay, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a season-ending injury, and where does my life pivot now? Mine was a rolled ankle that I came back from in a week or two, right? And so for me, it wasn't season ending, but they happen all the time. I think of TCU, the basketball team right now, right? And they had tryouts in the middle of the season. And so for them, they pivoted, right? And those injured players are now taking on new roles. Maybe they moved from, I don't know basketball very well, but one position to the other. And I think at every point in our life, athletics can teach us something, and it's all about our mind frame.
Absolutely. And for our general listeners that aren't athletes or haven't served on a team, you get this in other areas too. You can get it in working on in school teams, or you get it robotics teams, or all different types of. It's just that it is something that I don't know if this is fair to say. So maybe our listeners will email me about it, which I welcome the emails.
Please.
Is our current situation with social media, we're all people are more lonely now
absolutely
than they ever have been. And we're very isolated. We have these idealistic ideas of what other people are doing. And so to develop these resiliency, or to develop these other coping strategies, can be difficult for individuals. And just picking up the phone to call. I mean, I work with undergrads every day.
Me too.
And some of them have literally never made a phone call.
They definitely struggle with the phone call aspect. I think in sexual health, a lot of times to make an appointment for an STI screening, you have to call. That is a barrier. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to change, but that's a tangent.
Oh, we're going to have a podcast, separate podcast on that. That is really fascinating. So how can people improve their social skills then to create authentic relationships outside of maybe social media or...
Yeah, we just talked about this in one of my classes, actually. I think the first thing is understanding that social media is an unrealistic expectation, right? We're posting things that we want the world to see because they are the best parts of us. And so I think there is a big narrative to try to be more authentic and to be more vulnerable, right? Life is not always rainbows and butterflies, right? And we shouldn't expect people to have these glamorous days every single day. And so I think coming back down to earth a little bit and being a little bit more authentic in social media. I encourage my students to try to put down their phones in general. So when we talk about keys to healthy relationships, we think about, are you being a good listener, right? We forget those active listening techniques sort of like now, right? Where you don't even have your phone at the table. And so how can we show the other person that we care about them, that we are interested in the conversation? Now that's not possible every time. Potentially there's something coming up in work or you have an assignment due, but how can we talk about the love languages, right? And somebody's love language is quality time and they just want to spend time. You don't even have to do an activity together. It could be we are doing things at the same time, but we know we're spending time together. So, being more vulnerable on social media and in real life. I think putting down the phone when we can. I think also thinking about what a healthy relationship looks like in general, and recognizing that we have not had a lot of opportunity to explore or even understand what a healthy relationship looks like. We haven't had really great examples, right? Media, movies doesn't do a great job. We see the divorced parents that are yelling at each other. We see, siblings who are in a disagreement, right? But we don't have a lot of healthy relationship examples. And so I think understanding your childhood and trauma that people have gone through and understanding what's our type of communication? Are we aggressive? Are we passive aggressive? And kind of doing that self-examination of who we are and why. And when we look for a healthy relationship or we're looking for a partner, even in a friend, what are we expecting and why? And have we communicated that to another person? And having, maybe putting down social media, maybe taking a break. I know it's Lent for some people, and so maybe it's putting down that phone for 30 days or having conversations about why we expect each other to live up to these social media expectations every day when that's not our real lives, right? Our hair is messy, the dog is a mess, the house is a mess, right? And what would the world look like if social media truly represented our everyday lives?
I think we would all feel a lot better. We'd feel a lot better about ourselves. I think one of the things that you said that really struck a chord was communicating. And you had mentioned, have you actually communicated to the person what you expect of them? And I think so many times communication, people are afraid to do that because they don't want to offend someone. They're not sure. And in the current, at least in America, the current environment is if you disagree or people feel that an opinion isn't respected or an opinion is a fact. It's, there's a lot of issues right now just in general in how we have dialogue.
Sure.
amongst each other.
Yeah.
Is there a little tidbit of advice that you could give to our listeners to maybe just one thing that they could think about? You talk about self-reflection. How do I even begin that?
So I want to take us back a little bit into the idea that as an athlete, especially in a team environment, and tell me if I'm pivoting too far here, we didn't have a voice. There was no voice. So for a lot of young athletes, and myself included, I felt that I was not worthy of opinion and was shot down very frequently. This is bringing up emotions, but just the idea that there is no I in team, and that you are important enough to do a job, but not important enough to have an opinion. And so for many, I think especially young athletes that never have the opportunity to transition from we to me, there's no surprise that we don't have boundaries, that we don't have this understanding that my opinion is valid and worthy, and that I am important, and that I deserve and am worthy of telling other people my opinion because it matters. And so for me, I think the biggest advice coming out of athletics is helping young people understand that they do have a voice. Yeah. And that they are important. So I think about many instances in which, especially in the college environment, it is sit down and be quiet and do what we need you to do, especially as a woman, and how that it silences your inner voice. And so I had never thought about who I was or what I wanted or my values.
That is I mean, you're blowing my mind right now, because I understand. I've never been a student athlete, but you see it. You know. Yeah. So how did you? If you don't want me to go personal, that's okay.
You could totally fine.
How did you start to recognize those things? What were the steps that led you to understand who you were as a person and what directions you wanted to go?
Yeah.
Or what boundaries you wanted to set and who you wanted to be friends with?
A lot of therapy, to be frankly honest. I just recognized after I finished my undergrad that I didn't know who I was. And I think that's very common. This transition out of sport is a very kind of time where a lot of athletes are, quote, lost, because our whole identity has been ball, travel, practice, school, right? We've been told what to do, what to wear, what to eat, when to do it, when to blink, right? And we've never really had, for some people, this may not be everyone's opinion, but especially in a team sport, you don't have a lot of options. There's a lot of things that are told to you, when to work out, what to work out, how to do it, right? And so you're taught that, again, it's not important. And so I think what I wish I had known is that you do have a voice and you do deserve boundaries. There are some limitations in team sports, but if you are uncomfortable, if you don't understand something, if you feel like your opinion isn't heard, how can you communicate that effectively? And finding the right environment to do that. So I think helping young athletes, I don't love the idea of this is why we're doing it, don't ask me questions. It's always, can you tell me more about that? Or, hey, my athletes are a little young right now there is a lot of direction, but I always say, ask me questions anytime. Or if you don't understand why I'm doing something, let me know. I'd be happy to explain it to you, because I want them to have boundaries. I want them to feel like they're worthy. I want them to feel like their emotions are valid. And so I think if we can help young people understand from a young age that at some point the sport might end, and that's okay, and that you are not just your sport. So you should be defined by the hobbies you like to do, the friends you like to hang out with, the events that you like to go to, and creating a more well-rounded person from a young age. Maybe that split and that transition after sport won't be so hard and fast. It'll be, I expect this coming. I know what to expect. I've been working on these resiliencies and these transition skills since I was 12. And so, I love club sports. I also think I encourage them to play multiple. Go to prom. Go on vacations with your friends, right? Like, how can we let these young athletes be kids and not so much of their only identity as their sport? Because many of them, like myself, I think are lost. And I share that with a lot of collegiate athletes that I've talked to, and wanting more kind of communication skills and information about like what's to come and how so many great skills came from sport, but also feeling so lost.
It's really fascinating. I'm enjoying everything that you're saying. And I think too about the role of a parent. And again, I don't have children of my own, but I can watch my family members that have kids, my nephews essentially, and see how their different take in, how they parent. And some, not necessarily my family members, but you see some individuals where they're almost a coach.
Sure.
And then you see other parents where maybe they don't push them enough to be resilient.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine how difficult that is as a parent. I don't Yeah,
Yeah.
they play a big role as well. So you've got
Absolutely.
as you said, you have the mentor, the coach, parent. Yeah, it's all a mix, right?
Yeah.
Everybody working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
So when you were saying, when you came out of sport and you realized, I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
I don't have boundaries. I don't know what I'm standing for, essentially.
Yeah.
How does that influence an athlete's overall health and well-being? Is there a link there to something more holistic?
Yeah, I think we as a society don't encourage young people to have boundaries. I can think of a lot of times where boundaries have been set and the negative reactions that have come from it. And so I think when you're constantly like, for example, when you think of boundary around physical activity and, after transitioning out of sport, I didn't love working out. And I was met with a little bit of resistance from coaches. Well, you've been working out your whole life. Why don't you want to continue? Well, it was terrible. And I didn't know why I was doing it. And, I had so many unanswered questions. And so I think transitioning out of sport should be a process, and helping other non-athletes understand that transition and how to provide support. This is what I went through and this is what happened and here's what I need now. I recognize that you didn't go through this process, but I might feel a little weird for a little bit. Yeah. I might have a lot of emotions and mixed feelings around what's happening. Can you help me walk through those? And I think some of that support should be professional, to be completely honest. I wish every athlete, regardless of level, especially at the college level, had a psychologist. And I think there should be access to it after sport. So you lose medical insurance from if you're on scholarship right after, but there should be some opportunities or programs that all athletes go through post athletics as a normal process of what to do. And so I think I don't know if there should be training for non-athletes, right? Especially like parents. For a lot of parents, their child's sport is their identity too, right? They've gone to every match, they've traveled, they've created relationships with the families, they've gone to, my parents came to New Orleans, like they had that fun going to those. And so for them, it's a loss too. It's not just a loss to the athlete, but if their family is involved, that kind of loss of identity too. And so I think not expecting people to just move on with their lives. Especially if they've been, many young athletes start at 8, 9, 10. My athletes are 10, right? So for them, their families are going to be in this for at least 8, 9, 10 years. And so how can we help the families recover too? I don't know if that should be with like club programs and helping. I don't know if we do a good enough job of preparing athletes and families for the college experience or the college experience that doesn't include a sport. Yeah. Because many athletes might play, travel soccer, travel whatever, and they don't go on to play college, and for them that can be devastating. Maybe they aren't good enough to make a team. Maybe they don't get a scholarship. Maybe it's a walk-on opportunity, but they need financial assistance. And so helping both the athlete and the families transition regardless of the path that is chosen.
You said something really interesting about, after you end sport and working out and like, I didn't like it because I didn't know what to do. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier where like, it's just like, here you do this, here you do this. And so I can only imagine what that's like to be with your friends and your friends are like, well, you know what to do. Yeah. And not only are you uncomfortable about it, but then having to be like, well, actually, I don't know why I did the things that I did. Yeah. So I can see some of these issues compounding together. Yeah. So what is one piece of communication advice you'd recommend to young adults, whether athlete or not, regarding romantic, professional, or friendship-like relationships? Is there a communication piece that works across all different types of relationships?
Yeah, we were just talking about this in one of my classes, actually. I think we make a lot of assumptions, and we don't ask enough questions. We don't ask enough clarifying questions. And so I think, one, being bold to be honest about what you want. We talk a lot about this in my class. The idea, if you're interested in someone, politely but respectfully, hey, I would like to go out with you. It doesn't have to be weird. It doesn't have to be awkward, but just this is what I'm looking for. And not being so afraid to tell people what we want and what we need. Because I think it's a lack of courage. It's a little bit of low self-worth, which is not surprising, right? If we're not pouring into young people, no wonder we lack self-worth. And so being bold about what you want. It doesn't have to be in your face, but hey, I really like you. I'd like to go on a date. And it doesn't have to be so one-sided. So I think encouraging people, we talk a lot about this in sexuality education, this values piece, right? Who are you and why? And that why piece is so important, right? I like someone who is a little bit softer of a communicator. Well, why? Did you experience trauma in your past? Did you have somebody who yelled at you? Did you not have any sort of communication? And so understanding who you are and what you're looking for, and then exploring that kind of underneath emotion, and being really, really brave and courageous and vulnerable, I think, to communicate that to another person. I think the vulnerability piece is huge. We often forget that it takes a lot of courage to be honest about who we are. And that goes back to that social media, right? Like putting up that facade of, oh, who is Megan, this person versus this person? Because telling the truth can be easier, can be harder potentially than, saying who we are. But does that really create authentic relationships and friendships, right? Think about like lying on job applications. Why do we do it? Because we want to be liked. We want to get the job, but are we going to be successful in that job? But I don't know that athletics necessarily encourages vulnerability.
I'm gonna guess no. I'm gonna guess in our current society does not.
Yeah,
no
and
matter
so
which.
One of the places I would like to get into is curricula for athletes around healthy relationships, around communication, around boundaries. I think that could be met with some pushback because coaches can have one prerogative, and my healthy education, healthy relationships education may not promote the same things, but I wish it could, because I think the goal is to help them have strong athletics, be good in the classroom, and be awesome people worthy of love and dignity in relationships. So maybe somebody would be willing to work and help me create that, and to get parents on board too.
Absolutely. I mean, you sold me, so I don't know if I'd be any help, but
yeah.
So my last question that I have for you, we've talked a lot about athletics, but you've also been in graduate school, which that's also a place that's very difficult to set boundaries. And your graduate school, for anyone that has not experienced it's an unusual time in life. But how does all of that influence relationships? A lot of those individuals, like I could barely take care of myself in graduate school. And then I had a colleague that was married with 3 kids and seemed to do it all. So are there similarities? Or how do you come out of that? Is it the same idea of knowing your self-worth, being honest with yourself?
I'll take this back to the athletics piece. One of the things that athletics taught me was this is not rock bottom. Like it could get athletics, I think at the collegiate level broke me down to a point of like anything above this is better. So I think I knew when I went into graduate school, it could be the worst day ever. And I was like, well, going to be better than the next day. So that is the one, there's a lot of positive things that came out of it. But for me, it was, I know there's going to be better days, right? And I knew my time management skills were so good out of athletics. And I think that's one of the best things that I was taught is I'm doing homework in the car. I have homework till 9 p.m. I'm going to eat on the go and I'm going to do it again the next day, but I'm going to come out of it. And so, graduate school was hard. And I think in ways, your PhD tests you to ways that you will never imagine. But, I think it's a different type of test. I think it's a test of determination, of pushing through, of you really have to advocate for yourself and what you want out of the program and what support you need. And so I think as I went through my degrees and through therapy, that I knew how to stand up for myself and ask for what I need. It took a lot. I also will say I had mentors throughout all of my academic degrees that I would never trade for the world. And one of the biggest things about graduate school is support and understanding that it's a selfish time, especially in your PhD. I commend my partner who, helped me. We're long distance. And so for them, it was, I can't talk tonight. I have a project to finish. I need chapter 2 of my dissertation to be done in the next 3 days. I'm going to have about an hour. And there's just waves of relationships, right? For them, that was being selfless enough to say, okay, your support that you need right now is distance. For my family, who always, were on the phone when I got back feedback on a chapter and it was rough, right? The statistical method didn't work or the rationale wasn't strong enough. But I think a lot of it came from self-worth and understanding that your PhD is done by 1% of the world. And being a woman in a PhD, being a woman in the South doing a PhD, doing a dissertation on reproductive health access in the South is just something that's not done by a lot. And so I think at that point I had the skills. There were still tough days. I shout out to my cohort mates, Nainika and Dr. McFadden and Dr. Lockhart now, that I would not have survived without, that we had pizza parties and we struggled through class together. And so
you have to find your tribe.
1,000%.
And it's not to say I as you're speaking, I do want to reach out to those that have started a PhD and not finished it.
Oh, 1,000%.
You did not fail.
No.
It's nothing that like you didn't have the self-worth to do it or something along those lines. It is
the telepathy.
I don't even like that sound is just what it is. And I always tell people, I say this having a PhD myself, and some may not agree with me, but I think there's always something a little off with us that do end up finishing a PhD.
Yeah.
We like rejection. We like to be told no all the time. We're okay with that. We're okay with not, with imposter syndrome. We all have it. Everyone does. Whether or not you have a PhD, but and it's these ideas. Your to-do list is never done.
Sure.
Every day there's positives to it. I'm giving you the negatives.
Yeah.
But I think there's always, and for those that got out and are living happy lives.
Good for you.
Oh,
yes.
There's days that I'm like, well, what did I do?
I know.
But I love what I do now.
Yeah.
But getting there was, and I love the analogy of anything's going to be better. The bar was so low that anything's going to be great. So.
And I think we can say the same for athletics. Yeah. There were times, and I reflect back on my athletic journey when I wish somebody had told me it had been okay to quit. And I didn't have that support because I was like, I want to be a D1 athlete. I want to be a D1 athlete. Nobody ever told me that it was okay not to. And I wish our society had a little bit more pressure to be happy and to enjoy your experience, and that there can be a success no matter what level you're at.
Exactly. I love that. I love ending there. Dr. Willams, thank you so much for coming in and joining our podcast today. We always ask our guests if they have a piece of advice or a tidbit they'd like to leave our listeners with. Is there anything you'd like to leave them with?
The one thing I've been kind of reflecting on is we're our biggest advocate. And it's never too late to stand up for yourself and to be really solid in who you are. And it's okay if others don't like you, because at the end of the day, you support yourself and you deserve to be happy and have, awesome relationships and friendships. And some people aren't going to be okay with that, but sometimes we have to choose ourselves and not other people.
Yeah. I was way too old when I figured that out. So I love you saying that because, if we could tell people that so much younger, that it's okay to have people not like you. It's perfectly okay. Be who you want to be and be the person. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Dr. Willams, for being here. And thank you again to all of our listeners for joining us for another episode. As always, if you have comments or feedback or even a topic that you'd like us to explore, please email us at huffines@tamu.edu. And as always, stay healthy and stay active. Thanks so much.
Thank you.